Turn the sound down a little bit, about like that, and welcome to another edition of the Omnist Hour. Been a while since I've been online. Been a busy time in my life. In addition to getting adjusted to a new country where I plan to live for perhaps a long time, I've gotten married again, surprisingly enough. New chapter of my life beginning. Today we're going to talk about a topic I've been wanting to get to you about for a while. I think it's very pertinent to what's going on in the world today. And the title of this discussion is going to be Narcissism, Sex, and Spirituality. So let's start with the first of those three subjects, narcissism. This is a much used word today, usually used as a pejorative to describe people that we can't stand and we think are the cause of all of our problems. I think that pretty much describes what comes to mind when most people think of the word narcissist, narcissism. Let's step back and redefine this word. Okay, if you remember, Narcissus was a young man who was in love with his own image, so much so that he spent day after day gazing at it in the reflection of the waters of a brook, and happened to get the notice of a goddess and was turned into, I think the brook or something like that, or became the spirit of the brook that he was so fascinated with looking at his image in. That's the origin. There are clinical definitions and so forth, but basically, if you think about what narcissism is, it's a fascination and a fixation on our own point of view, on our own point of reference. Now, there are two possible poles of that fixation. There is sort of the self-aggrandizing narcissism that looks at the world around us and says, I am the greatest thing in this world. I'm so much better than everybody else. I know so much more. I'm so much more capable and in tune with things, in the know, in sync, in harmony. I'm at the highest frequency, and everything else I see is beneath me. That's one pole of narcissism, saying my viewpoint is the best. It's the most wonderful. Anyone who doesn't believe like I do must be an inferior being. Okay? The other pole of narcissism is the victim pole. My point of view is good, it's right, but I'm put down for it. I'm oppressed for it. I'm made into the scapegoat, a victim, whatever. That's the other polarity of narcissism. So it's two poles are sort of the aggressive pole of I'm the best, and the passive aggressive pole of I'm the best, but I'm being put down by people, and that's why I have so many problems and I'm not achieving what I should be achieving, and why people don't appreciate me like they should. Okay? And those two poles of narcissism infect us all. We all have a worldview about various things. In some sense, our worldview is an elitist one. Our view of things is better, our position is better, our country is better, our sex is better, our whatever is better, and therefore I'm in a superior position to make judgments, to be the boss. And there are other things that we may, you can have both poles in your own makeup, and most people do. There may be other things about which, like, well, I know I'm a really good engineer, but the company doesn't appreciate me, and the company's full of shit, and the managers don't know anything, and I'm oppressed, and they don't appreciate me, and I'm the victim. And that's another pole. That's a passive-aggressive pole of narcissism. And these two poles of how we look at ourselves, how we look at our relationship with the world around us, are part of the psychological makeup of every human being, every soul. And those souls incarnated in human form tend to have a very strong component of that. And that component is largely a function of our experience, which, if you followed my other presentations, is a function of reincarnation and karma. We live many times, we have many experiences, and those experiences shape us into the kind of soul that we have effectively chosen to be. And there are some souls that gravitate towards being the aggressive narcissist. My way is better, I know better than everybody else, I am superior being, and I have this innate sense of entitlement and empowerment because I have so much value attached to what I see as my identity, my personal identity, or even a group identity. And there are other people who gravitate towards the other pole of being the victim, being, oh, well, I could accomplish this, I could do that, but something's always holding me down. Something's always keeping me back. And somewhere in between lies every single soul at some point in their journey through many, many lives. And it can change over time. When you're a very young soul, your first few lives in forms where you are developing a lot of character, as we've discussed, you don't develop a lot of character living a life as an elementary particle, living a life as a rock. You develop character living a life as higher animals, intelligent species, perhaps living a life as an idea. Could give you a fair amount of character depending on what the idea was. Okay, so let's ground this now in what's going on today. Pretty much every problem we're facing is rooted in identity. Who we think of ourselves as, how we associate ourselves with the world, and a worldview that makes us feel part of the in crowd or part of the out crowd if we like being outsiders. Those identities are based upon very real differences. So the most fundamental identity that we have is naturally our biological sex. Male or female. It's the most digital identity that we had up to this point. Now it's becoming much less digital, let's say, under the influence of other forces that, I don't know, maybe don't want sex to have the important role it had, or think that sex is maybe the fundamental problem with the human species. And that viewpoint maybe is fairly popular with those who reject the idea of creation, reject the idea of some superior beings deciding what the rules of the game were and deciding that there was this male-female difference in sex that was obviously such a bad idea because it creates so much inequality. And there are many that think that way, and if you make that a core part of your being, as do feminists, as do chauvinists, you find that that becomes a core piece of your personal narcissism. And everybody has narcissism. It's not a matter of, oh, you're a narcissist and I'm not. The people pointing to other people and calling them narcissists, that's the act of a narcissistic person. To better make oneself appear better or to feel oneself better by calling someone else a narcissist is an act of a narcissistic person. Because it's basically, calling the pot, calling the kettle black, when it's all a matter of degree. We're all narcissistic, each in our own way, to the extent that we are either elitist or defeatist in our attitudes towards our relationships in the world. Personal relationships, business relationships, spiritual relationships, political relationships. Okay? This applies in every dimension and is so incredibly apparent if you look at the United States, which most people are fairly familiar with, the polarities of the United States, because so much of our culture is in the news, in the media, blasted around everywhere. The cultural stereotypes are becoming the stereotypes of the world, are becoming the stereotypes of global culture. Which, what is global culture? What is globalism? Think about that, because that's a huge topic right now, right? Globalism is like what everybody's chanting as the mantra of the future. And it's competing visions of globalism that are causing a lot of our political turmoil. There's the communist viewpoint of globalism that says we just need the right people in charge. We don't need to have multiple parties. We need just one party that has all the answers, that is going to do what's best for everybody, for the good of all. That's one view of globalism. The other view of globalism is basically the other pole of the pure libertarian, who says, you know what, I'm confident in myself, I'm confident in my abilities, I'm confident that I can compete on a level playing field. Just give me my rights, give me my freedom, and we'll be just fine. And that's another viewpoint of globalism that is quite popular among a certain brand of narcissists. Both of those viewpoints are narcissistic. They're an unreasonable view of the world based upon how we feel about our position in it. If you are doing pretty well in life, you're established in your career, you're making good money, you're able to support a family, you're able to set aside enough that you're not too worried about a major disaster, life is good, and you think, oh, I've done it all myself, I owe it all to myself. It's very easy to be an aggressive narcissist from that viewpoint. If you're a worker bee, been working at your job, never get a promotion, you're not making as much money as you should, and inflation keeps putting you in a more difficult spot each year. You can't make enough to barely feed your family or yourself or house yourself, and let alone setting aside any for the future. And you've got all this fear and craziness coming on because of the pandemic and the mounting crisis between China and the US, all the global conflicts and so forth. Yeah, you could take a very dark narcissistic view of things and say, you know what? This is all because of the rich people, all because of those selfish bastards that control everything, and we just need to wipe them all out and put people that think like me in power. And this is the pole that Marxists play to basically get narcissistic people to support their power grabs, which anybody who's observed Marxism in action, once the revolution happens and the party that's supposed to make everything perfect for everybody is in control, they don't make things perfect. They make things perfect for the people in their party. And they create an elitist system that rewards the people that are part of the in crowd. They're the ones that get all the best assignments, and they're the ones whose families get all the best contracts, and you end up with a situation not unlike Communist China, Stalinist Russia, Nazi Germany, or the uniparty states of today. In the United States, California is a perfect example of a uniparty state, but there are also uniparty Republican states where one side controls everything, dictates everything, and ultimately they look about the same. The only real difference is in who they pretend to support in order to get enough votes to pretend like they've still got a democracy going. So in California, you have a bunch of money thrown at useless social programs with no accountability, no idea of cost benefit, as long as they can find taxpayers to pay for them and keep getting the people to vote in folks that will spend other people's money on anything that gets them elected. California keeps chugging along and building up larger and larger holes in their fiscal sovereignty, effectively. In a Republican state, uniparty state, it's the same thing. Only their infrastructure falls apart. The nice neighborhoods get taken care of and have good police, and the places that nobody cares about because the voters don't have the wherewithal to even worry about voting. They're too busy making ends meet and trying to figure out how to survive. Those places are just, I mean, I've been to both. I've been to both poles in the U.S. and around the world even. And I can tell you, neither party, given absolute power, has done anything good for the people. Nor will they ever. And now we're facing the idiocy of we've got one party in power that basically wants to turn the U.S. into the equivalent of Communist China, a uniparty state where they pretend everything is perfect. They say everything is perfect. If you don't believe it, you must be a conspiracy theorist, and you must be a white supremacist, and you must be crazy Trumpy, and you need to be obliterated and oppressed. Well, let me tell you, this is a very narcissistic viewpoint of the United States. And it's a combination of many narcissistic viewpoints, because it's basically a combination of one pole of all the identity politic divisions that have tortured the United States for many, many decades. One of the biggest of which is the sexual divide. And so that's where I'm leading next, is narcissism and sex. There is a very strong current of people, feminists, who believe narcissism is a male problem. It isn't. Who believe all the world's problems are a male problem. They aren't. Yes, there were times in the world where female-dominant societies prevailed, and they had their own sets of pluses and minuses. They weren't better at running things than patriarchies. In fact, the most successful societies in history have been ones where the sexes were relatively equal in influence, but influenced the areas that they were best tuned to. Okay? If you are a female, you have reproductive organs. I'm sorry, that's part of being a human female. That's part of your anatomy. Now you can rail against God and say, "Oh, God hates females for giving us this burden." Or you could view it as, "Oh, this is the greatest thing in the world. We have the children, so we should have all the power. And all we need, we don't need men for anything. All they do is give us their sperm, and we could have a baby in a moment just by going out and flashing our tits and getting fucked. And then go have our baby with a colony of females who can really take care of the children. And we'll just keep a few males around as stud farm." This is the darkness of feminism carried to its extremes. And that's what many people would like to do. If you carry female narcissism, aggressive narcissism, to its ultimate conclusion, that's where you arrive. And it's no more healthy than male narcissism, which is absolutely prevalent in societies that are very patriarchal. And you can still see it all around the world. Most particularly in communist China, of all places, which is supposed to be the great shining hope of the world for fixing the problems. Communism, right? Wrong. Communism itself is a very narcissistic ideology. We are a victim of narcissistic thinking throughout our culture, now and forever. This is the dark problem that humanity has had to deal with. And we have had to deal with narcissistic spirituality too. The whole idea that there's one God and it's my God, and anybody who doesn't believe in my God is going to be damned. That's narcissism. The whole idea of, well, we are the chosen people, and anybody that puts us down or persecutes us is going to be punished. That's the dark narcissism, right? That's the victim narcissism. It says that, if we aren't the best, it's because, or on top, it's because evil people are putting us down. And it makes everything into a black and white, us versus them, or me versus the world battle, either as the hero or as the victim. This is the core of narcissism. If you think that way on any dimension, if you think your country is better than any other country, if you think another country is absolutely bad, if you think your religion is better than anybody else's, or another religion is absolutely bad, that is narcissistic thought. You can come up with all sorts of rationalizations and justifications for it. Oh, well, Muslims, they only worship Allah. Well, okay, what's the difference between Allah and God? A name? God has many names, and different religions have different gods. Some religions have many gods, and arguably the religions that had many gods were much more healthy than the ones that only have one. Before the invention of monotheism, yes, there were wars, there were conflicts. There were conflicts between kingdoms and cities. And the winning side maybe forced their god a little bit on the others, but more or less what happened in general is the other god was melded with the one, and they came up with a unified culture that, okay, well, in this city, in our culture, this one god is worshipped a little bit more than the other, and then this one's, and this was the old Roman Empire before monotheism. It was a melting pot of many religions, many gods, many beliefs, and people just accepted that the spiritual world was a complex place with a lot of different forces. Now think of that. That maps much more closely to the reality of what happens in humanity than to say, oh, well, anything that is good that I like must come from God, and anything that I don't like must come from Satan. And God is the only God, but Satan somehow has some power too. It's kind of anti-God, and this is the silliness of duality. And the answer doesn't lie in one. That's basically closing your eyes and saying, oh, all is good, all is great. Oneness is not the answer. All it does is negate the existence of evil and says, oh, well, you just don't see it from the right perspective. And if something bad is happening now, it's all going to be for the ultimate good. This is how your hardcore love, peace, harmony Buddhist people think, despite so much evidence to the contrary, that, well, we can be nice to the Communist Party in China. We can appease them. We can keep trying to convince them to play fair with the rest of the world, but it hasn't worked. And it's only gotten worse. They've gotten more oppressive of their own people. They've gotten more oppressive of the world, to the point where, most countries, if they were asked who they were afraid of, would be more afraid of Chinese imperialism than Western imperialism at this point, which is saying a lot after the history of the last few hundred years. What I'm saying is that it's the narcissistic viewpoints that are killing us now. It's low consciousness bullshit to think that the world will ever look the way you see it. And the way you see it is the absolute truth. The next level of bullshit is to say, well, everybody sees something different, so there is no truth. That's kind of the oneness fallacy. None of those is very helpful. They both basically encourage those who have little enough regard for karma or divine retribution to basically ride roughshod over everybody else, who are either forced to be the outsider, constantly fighting the system, or just acquiesce to, well, that's just the way it is. I can't do anything about it. I'll just do the best I can in my little corner of the universe and hope things get better. And that's, again, falling into the passive-aggressive category of narcissism that allows you to not take an active part in what's going on and thus enable what's going wrong. So I think what I'm trying to say through all this is that we need to drop back and figure out what the sources of our narcissism are, and find more healthy fundamentals for our values and belief systems. We cannot support a world based in spiritual narcissism, political narcissism, sexual narcissism, racial narcissism, cultural narcissism. Okay? You got to give it up. Start looking at the world from other points of view, not as well, okay, my point of view is bad. That's sort of the message been going through American culture for the last few decades is, oh, okay, well, all of this stuff that we had before that was, the Pledge of Allegiance and nationalism, following the flag and supporting our country, that's suddenly supposed to be something bad. Well, that's not the answer. All that is putting the narcissism on the other foot. You go from being an aggressive narcissist to a passive-aggressive narcissist supporting the demise of your country. You go from being a patriot to an anti-patriot. Both of them are equally narcissistic positions. The racist, the anti-racist are two forms of narcissism. The sexist, the anti-sexist, two forms of narcissism. The theist, the atheist, two forms of narcissism. Think about it. Anyway, I think that's all I have to say on the subject for today. I hope you enjoyed my talk, and I hope you'll tune in again to the Omnist Hour. Again, if you like my work, like, share, subscribe, drop me a line on Facebook or on YouTube. If you feel inclined to contribute, I don't have a Patreon page. I do have a PayPal. It's linked to robtrump@yahoo.com. Send a couple of cents. I don't need it, but if you want, I appreciate if you buy my book, follow my channel, and engage. Because that's the only way that we make things better is by engagement, by discussion, by argument. Not by shutting down argument, not by shutting people up. So if you don't like me, try to shut me up. Try to shut me off. Try to engage with me. Do something, because I'm going to keep posting. And I think I might get a following, because what I'm saying should resonate with anybody that's thinking deeply about what's going on in the world today. Well, that's it. Thank you, and tune in again for the Omnist Hour.